You paid it off. The number hit zero, and something in your body relaxed in a way it had not relaxed in a long time. You earned that feeling. The discipline was real. The sacrifice was real. The relief was real. Now here is the part that comes after the relief. The debt is gone. The machine that built it is still running, not because you failed to learn anything, because the machine does not live in the balance. It lives in the decisions that happen before the balance. The way you respond to stress by spending. The way a sale creates urgency that was not there a second before. The way the end of a difficult month feels like permission. The way the number going down makes the next purchase feel earned. None of that stopped when the balance hit zero. It was never in the balance to begin with. You deleted the output. The program that generates it kept running. And right now, quietly, it is already generating the next one. If you want videos that show you not just the debt, but the machine running underneath it, subscribe now. That is exactly what this channel is built for. Sit with that for a moment. You did not imagine the relief. It was not fake. It was not weak. Paying off a debt takes real discipline. It takes months of saying no to things you wanted. It takes a kind of quiet endurance most people never see. So this is not a story about failure. This is a story about a gap between the thing you fixed and the thing that broke it. You fixed the number. You did not touch the system that produced the number. And that system was never really about money. Money was just the material it happened to use. Think about what actually preceded the debt, not the purchases. The moments before the purchases. The night you were exhausted. A single click felt like the only kindness left in the day. The morning a countdown timer made a decision feel urgent. It was not urgent at all. The week everything went wrong. Buying something small felt like proof you still had control. None of those moments were about the item you bought. They were about a feeling you were trying to end. The debt was never the problem. The debt was the residue of a problem. That problem had already finished acting before you noticed it. This is the part most people skip past. They look at the balance. They celebrate the balance going down. They assume the story ends there. But a balance is an output, and an output is downstream of a process. If the process is untouched, the process will simply produce again. It does not need your permission. It does not need you to notice. It only needs the same conditions to appear again. And the conditions almost always do. Think about it outside of money for a second. Someone loses weight. The scale finally moves. They feel like a different person. Then, months later, the weight returns. Not because they lack willpower, because the eating pattern that created the weight was never actually examined. They changed the output. They never touched the behavior that generated it. Someone ends a relationship that was slowly wearing them down. They feel free. They feel like they escaped something. Then, a year later, they notice the same pattern forming again. Different person, different city, different face. They changed the person. They did not change the part of them that kept choosing that shape of relationship. This is the same architecture as the debt. An output disappears. A process remains untouched underneath it. The process quietly begins building the next output. You are not weak for this. You are, in fact, behaving exactly the way the machine expects you to behave, because the machine was never designed to be noticed. It was designed to feel like your own decision every single time. Think about how quiet the whole thing actually is. Nobody announces that a trigger is happening. Nobody tells you that a window has opened. There is no alarm. A feeling of exhaustion simply turns into a search bar and a credit card. The entire process is engineered to feel like nothing more than a normal Tuesday. That is not an accident. A visible mechanism can be resisted. An invisible one cannot. So the machine hides in the most ordinary places you can imagine. It hides in a notification that arrives at exactly the moment your guard is lowest. It hides in a friend mentioning something they bought and the quiet comparison that follows. It hides in the specific hour of the night. The hour when your decision-making is tired. None of these moments feel like a system. Each one feels like a small, isolated choice. That is the illusion. Every machine wants to look like a series of unrelated events. If you saw the pattern clearly, all at once you would resist it immediately, so it never shows itself all at once. It shows itself one trigger at a time. One purchase does not feel like a system. It feels like a single reasonable decision. 10 purchases across a year do not feel connected either because months sit between them. Only the balance connects them. Only the number forces you to see the pattern as a whole. This is the strange, uncomfortable value the debt actually had. It was the one place where the invisible process finally became visible enough to measure. The moment you paid it off, you did not just remove a burden. You also removed the only mirror that had been showing you the pattern clearly. Without that mirror, the same triggers can return, one at a time, feeling isolated again, feeling disconnected again, feeling like nothing more than a single reasonable decision each time. This is why so many people describe the exact same story, almost word for word. They pay off a debt. They feel free. Then, quietly, a new balance begins forming. They describe it as falling back into old habits, as if habits were the entire story, but a habit is just a visible trace. The machine underneath the habit is the actual author. You can replace one habit with another, and the machine will simply use the replacement. This is why willpower alone rarely holds for long against something structural like this. Willpower is a response to a single decision. The machine operates one layer below decisions. It shapes which options even occur to you before you consciously choose between them. By the time you are choosing, the machine has already narrowed what feels possible. This is worth repeating slowly because it is easy to miss. The machine does not wait for you to decide. It shapes the menu before you arrive. It decides which option feels obvious, which option feels like relief, which option feels earned. You still make the final choice, but the choice was never as open as it felt. This is not a comfortable idea. It is not meant to be comfortable. It is meant to explain something. Why the same story repeats for so many people so often. Not because they are careless. Not because they never learned a lesson the first time, because the lesson they learned was about a number. The machine was never about a number. Before we continue, drop a comment right now. Have you ever paid off a debt and felt completely free and only to find yourself back in the same position months later? Tell me below. I read every single one. Let us name the machine directly, not as an accusation, as a diagram. It runs on 3 ingredients: a trigger, a window, a reward that arrives faster than the cost does. The trigger is almost always emotional: stress, boredom, loneliness, exhaustion. A bad day that feels unbearable without a small relief. The window is the short period where a decision feels urgent. Nothing in your actual life changed in the last 10 minutes. A sale that ends tonight. A cart that says only 2 left. A feeling that says you deserve this right now before the feeling passes. The reward is immediate. The cost is not. This gap is the entire mechanism. You feel better in the next 30 seconds. You pay for it in a future that has not arrived yet. It does not feel real while you are deciding. This is not a character flaw. This is how a nervous system works when it has not been shown the pattern. Once you pay off the debt, none of these 3 ingredients disappear. The stress does not disappear. The urgency windows built into most of modern commerce do not disappear. The gap between immediate reward and delayed cost does not disappear. Only the output disappears, the balance, the number you were staring at every month. And because the output disappears, it feels like the story is over. That feeling of completion is the most dangerous part of the entire cycle. It is dangerous for one reason. It lowers your guard exactly when the machine is still running. You stop watching for the trigger. You assume it only mattered while there was a debt to feed. You stop noticing the urgency windows. You assume they were only dangerous while you were vulnerable. You stop questioning the small purchases. The big number that used to remind you is gone now. The machine does not need you to be in debt to keep running. It only needs you to stop paying attention. And paying off a debt is, ironically, one of the fastest ways to stop paying attention at all. Here is the quiet cost that never shows up on a bank statement. It is not the possibility of new debt. That is only the visible symptom. The real cost is believing you already solved something you never actually looked at. You solved a symptom and mistook it for a cure. That mistake does not just apply to money. It applies to almost every visible problem you have ever declared finished. The habit you quit for a month and assumed was gone. The argument pattern you stopped with one person, only to find it waiting with the next. The anxious spiral you interrupted once and assumed was permanently interrupted. In every case, an output stopped. The underlying process kept running quietly in the background, waiting for its usual conditions to return. This is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to redirect your attention to the right target. The target was never the balance. The target was never the number on the app that used to make your stomach tighten. The target is the decision that happens before the balance, the decision that happens in seconds, before you even register that a decision is being made. That decision is where the entire machine actually lives. Notice it does not ask for your consent. It only asks for a familiar feeling and a fast enough window. You paid off the debt. That was real. That mattered. Do not let anyone diminish that. But the machine that built it never received a signal to stop. It only lost temporarily its most visible output. It is still sitting there, patient, indifferent to how proud you are of the zero. It does not need the balance to be high to keep working. It only needs the next trigger, the next moment of pressure, the next opening that feels smaller than it is. And it has been waiting, quietly, since the day you hit zero. There is one more thing worth sitting with before we close this. The machine is not your enemy in the way a villain is an enemy. It has no intention. It has no memory of you specifically. It is simply a pattern. Patterns do not stop because you defeated them once. Patterns stop when the conditions change. This means the goal was never guilt. Not guilt about the debt returning as a risk. Guilt is just another feeling the machine can use as a trigger if you let it. The goal is something quieter. The goal is attention placed in a different location than before. Not attention on the balance. Attention on the 30 seconds before the balance moves at all. That is the only place the machine can actually be interrupted. While it is still working, not after the purchase, not at the end of the month, staring at a statement. In the moment the trigger arrives and the window opens and the reward feels close. That moment is small. It rarely announces itself as important. It usually feels unremarkable. But every single balance you have ever paid off began in a moment exactly like that. So did every balance still forming right now. In accounts, nobody is checking today. This is not a call to punish yourself for every small purchase you make. Most small purchases are not the machine. Most are simply normal parts of a normal life. The difference is not the purchase itself. The difference is what preceded it, internally. Was there a feeling you were trying to end? Was there a window that felt urgent? Did the reward arrive faster than any thought about the cost had time to form? If the answer is yes, that is not a purchase. That is the machine, mid-cycle. If the answer is no, it is simply a choice, made with the full picture in view. Learning the difference does not happen in a single video or a single realization. It happens slowly, the same way the original pattern was built, one moment at a time. But it starts somewhere. It starts with noticing the process instead of only the output. It starts with treating the zero on the balance as a pause, not as an ending. A pause is not a resolution. A pause is simply a quiet stretch between two moments. The machine does not care how long the pause lasts. It only waits for the next opening. You cannot shut it down with a single payment. No matter how large that payment was, you can only get better at noticing it. One small moment at a time, patiently. That is not a dramatic ending. It is not meant to be dramatic. It is simply the truth underneath the story that usually only shows you the balance. The debt is gone. The machine that built it is still running. It does not need the balance to be high to keep working. If this changed the way you see the debt you paid off or the one you are currently paying, subscribe now. Every week, this channel shows you not just the number, but the machine running underneath it.